here in America, we've decided that the number one thing that we are all after is to be happy. And I used to think that we had to tell people, don't worry about being happy. Don't be concerned about being happy. Be concerned about being holy. But you know what? People who submit their lives to God, guess what we are? When we realize, when we make ourselves a God or something else a God that shouldn't be a God, that God lets us down. That is not a recipe for happiness. But when we let God be God and we put God on the throne of our heart and we worship only Him, God does not let us down. Even through the tough times, God does not let us down. I'd like to tell you a story to illustrate this. Here at Enon Baptist Church, we are all about kids, and I'll give you the secret reason that we are all about kids. Not only are kids cute and funny and they run around in circles when they're supposed to be on stage singing, but by the same token, you know what adults are? Grown-up kids. Grown-up kids. In fact, the Bible describes this life as childhood and death as a graduation, if you know the Lord. And so we are all just big kids in some ways. We have the same fears and the same needs as we did when we were children in many ways. A need to know that someone loves us and a need for God to take care of us, just like we had a need for our parents to take care of us. And so we've been telling Bible stories on Sunday morning because I want to teach you guys the Bible the way my dad taught me the Bible. So real quick, I'm going to tell a quick Bible story. Jesus and His disciples Jesus was preaching to the crowds, and the crowds loved Jesus because Jesus loved them. You know, the person with the greatest influence in your life is the person that loves you the most. And so if you want to have influence on people, love them. And Jesus exemplified that. But there was too much ministry going on for Jesus and His apostles, His 12 men that helped Him out with His ministry. So they tried to get away to the mountains by the Sea of Galilee, and guess what? The crowds found them there too. And it's good to be doing ministry, but Jesus said, we have really got to get away. Guys, get in a boat. Go to the other side. I'm going to sneak around or something, and I will meet you on the other side. So the 12 men got into a boat. Some of them had been experienced fishermen on the Sea of Galilee before Jesus had called them into the ministry. And so they all pushed off in this boat. They got out in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. We call it a sea. It's actually a large inland lake, and it's big enough that you can get in the middle and not be able to see any shore in any direction. It looks like a sea. And out there in the middle of that huge sea, a storm suddenly came up, which is not all that unusual for the Sea of Galilee. And so one of the sudden storms came up. The winds were beating the boat, the waves were beating the boat, and the rains were pouring down, and the sky was dark, and the experienced fishermen probably felt that this was the kind of storm that you die in, the kind of storm that you don't come back from, and they didn't drag the bottom for bodies back then. You were gone. There was not even enough to have a funeral, basically. And on top of all of those problems, they looked out across the water, and they saw a figure on top of the water. Well, what else can that be but a ghost? So they got very scared, and oh no, something's after our souls, not just our lives. And about the time they were realizing that something was out there on the water, that thing called out to them and said, don't be afraid. It's me, Jesus. And Peter, always the first one to open his big fat mouth. That's Peter, sorry. He said, Lord, if that's you, I want to come out on the water too. And Jesus gave him permission, and he stepped out of the boat, and lo and behold, when he stepped out of the boat, he could also walk on top of the water, just like Jesus. Well, this was exciting. And so he was walking toward Jesus. Now, I had a whole lot of Bible cartoons I watched as a kid, okay? And the water's always smooth when Peter's walking out there. But there was the huge storm with the wind and the waves and the rain. So I don't even begin to know what this looked like as Peter's just walking on top of the water to Jesus in the middle of all of this storm. But if you know the story, you know that at some point Peter got out there and he forgot about the fact that he could walk on water, and he got to thinking about the storm all around him. And whenever he took his eyes off of Jesus and was scared of the storm, he sank. But thankfully, Jesus was there immediately to grab him and haul him back up to the top. And the first thing Jesus said was, "Oh, you have such small faith." Now, if we want to be lazy, we can interpret that to mean that as long as you have the faith, you can do whatever miracle it is. Folks, when you're in the middle of the storm, the point of the story is to keep your eyes on Jesus. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Whenever they get back to the boat, Jesus commands the winds and the waves to stop, and they do. And of course, all of the 12 men, they've been traveling with Jesus for a little while, but they turn to each other and they go, what kind of man can give orders to the wind and the sea and they obey him? And so Jesus is God. That's what kind of man can give orders to the wind and sea and obey him. And you might be going through something today. You might be going through a storm in your life, and sometimes God calms the storm. There's a visible miracle that you can see where it all suddenly quits and stops and you come out of the storm. And other times, we don't have to worry about the storm that is still going on and God still hasn't stopped, because God has given us the ability to walk on water. And so, even in the bad times and even in the rough times, we are able to rely on Jesus because he will see us through to the end. It may not be the end that we wanted, but it is the end that God has planned for us. And I want you to know today that if you don't know Jesus, I'm afraid I've got to explain to you that you don't have any such assurance about how everything's going to be okay. It means that you are still in the part of humanity that is still in rebellion against God. But Jesus sent his Son. God was willing to send his Son for you. Jesus was willing to die for you. Won't you accept him today? Turn your life over to him and let him handle all of those things that you know that you can't. God is going to see you through. Believe on Jesus and let God see you through.